So this is Damson, and here we are doing another video. I somehow volunteered to do this. I'm not exactly sure how, but let's go on along with it. The topic today is female Mandalorian armor. That is more commonly referred to as boob plates, like these ones. So most plates that you find around that are pre-made or that others have made that are patterns already out there end up with peaks and spikes, and everybody was impressed that mine did not. So they asked me to do a tutorial. I accepted just because that I kind of have this habit of not knowing how to tell people no. So the problem is that you need the right template to start with, and most people have been doing them wrong. So coming up in 1 second here is the pattern that I use. Actually, this is a finished plate template that has been cut out, ready to use. It just needs to be heated up and formed to be the right shape, as in the previous explanation there. And then this is my template that I created, and then I modified it to get this final plate of sorts. And it's not really a final plate either, because there was some modifications I did to that as well. So another part that's needed after you form this, which forming is easy, that's not a problem. The problem is welding. So here's how you weld. You have the joins already together. We're presuming you already have them together. I'm just using a couple of bits of scrap. So you have your soldering iron that's nice and hot. It gets hot enough to do the job. Now I'm going too fast when I'm doing this, quite honestly, and so it made a really bad join. So go slower. Make sure that you go through about almost halfway through when you're doing this initial tack weld, just so that you're fusing the entire depth of the material. Otherwise it tends to fall apart. So after you get through the first pass there, obviously you'll want to do the other side. So you flip it over and you do the other side. Now another tip is that if the pieces do not, if the joints do not match up perfectly, you can kind of force them a little bit and do some tack weld on the first layer from the outside edge where you want them to meet up perfectly, and then do the inside tack weld. And then what you're left with after you get all the tack welds done is a piece that looks like this. It's a nice little groove. Now the problem there is that you now have a very large groove, which is obviously a weak spot. It's going to be a weak spot either way, but with less material there, it's even weaker. So what we need to do then is put material back in. Normally when welding, you're doing both of these at the same time. In this, unless you have a plastic welder, you need to do it in 2 steps. So this is where you keep your scraps. So what you end up with then is you're using your scrap material to refill the welds that you're doing. Make sure to just kind of hold it like a pencil. That's the best way to get at it, honestly, without too much hand fatigue. Otherwise you're just going to be arguing all day, because you want to use the edge of the thing to heat up as much area as possible. So you want to use the broadest point and just kind of slide it in so that you're filling the area, and then just kind of wiggle it around so that you're fusing it with the outside as well, which I didn't do very well on this. Like I said, this was a quick example just for these purposes here, but normally you would be spending a lot more time doing this here of heating all the materials so that the whole chunk of plastic is then fusing to become one unit rather than one weakly bonded bit that you're filling in with and 2 separate other pieces. And this is handy in other stuff later as well. excuse me, if you're working with other stuff, if you decide to build other things out of ABS, this technique works. Just remember that it is going to be a weak point, and so plan for that. And there's no way around it unless you're, like I said, using a professional plastic welding gun. The problem is those are really expensive, and it's still going to be weak, just not as weak as this kind of hodgepodge method that quite a few people have come up with. Now, the way I do it then is then hold it kind of like a knife there, and that's just to smooth it over so that you have less sanding to do. Personally, I'm lazy. I would rather not spend all day sanding things. So if you just spend a tiny bit of time passing over that nice and slowly with a flat edge like a knife, you can just carve off any excess and smooth it all out at the same time, because that you are going to end up with valleys forming that you're not anticipating, and that's just reality. Things happen, problems occur. Now, as far as that template that I mentioned to begin with, I'll be getting that linked as a PDF, 1-to-1 scale later. It seems to work fairly well for most everybody that I've encountered so far, which is 3 people. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It does need modifications based on your body, so obviously print it out, tape it together, see if it works for you, modify from there. As far as the welding goes, what you end up with then in the end after you do all this is something that looks along the lines of this. It doesn't take much to sand that down. And after you get it sanded, you'll never know it's there, quite honestly, unless you push on it too hard and it breaks. So that's pretty much what I got on this, I think. So if you have any questions, comments, let me know. Obviously, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I'll see if I can come up with another project, since I haven't really been doing much with this so far. Anyway,